Hey guys, Season 3 of The Walking Dead was finally released, and this time its first 2 episodes were put out at once. So I want to take a minute to tell you guys how I felt about Ties That Bind. We'll keep it simple. I'll go over what I thought was good, what I thought was bad, and what my hopes are for the rest of the season.
I'll be around more, honestly. You can count on it,
huh? I want to believe that. I do.
Javier is a really strong protagonist. I love the level of narrative focus that's already been placed on him in his arc. I also like that we've returned to a story of redemption, like Lee's in Season 1. Except with Javi, it's a more complex one with an even stronger foundation than Lee's. Don't get me wrong, Lee was a good protagonist, but his whole, prison redemption arc thing was kind of, barren? We know he killed a man, but we don't really get to see the consequences of that. We don't play through any flashbacks, and we don't really get a chance to hear how Lee feels about what he did. At least, not in detail. And we don't interact with his wife or the dead guy's family, so we don't really get to see how they were hurt by him and his actions. Additionally, Lee and all of the other characters end up killing people anyway because, they're in the apocalypse together. And because of that, it doesn't feel like Lee has a lot to redeem in the first place. Or at least, redemption doesn't feel central to his character. With Javi, his story starts with him failing his family. That's the defining character moment for him. And that's something we return to again and again, him drifting in and out of their lives and taking advantage of them in the process. So that we can really understand this, the game lets us play through those moments. With that, we're given a better idea of where Javi stands and why his family feels the way they do about him. And we get to see his actions and the reactions they cause firsthand. With this context provided, Javier's need to redeem himself and his relationship with his family feels incredibly important and intrinsic to his character. So, if I had to guess, I'd safely say that the game is going to be about the Garcia family and where Javi fits within it. It's going to be about Javi developing a sense of true responsibility and being there for his family when they need him, no matter what he has to sacrifice to do so. And I can appreciate that. What I also appreciate is how this theme is supported by all the small choices you make involving your family, such as whether or not you care for and stay with them when other options are presented. And since there's been so much emphasis on Javier's dynamic with his family, deaths like Mariana's feel so damn heavy. Another thing that has gotten a lot of narrative attention is the New Frontier. I really like how they've been building up that group and our entry into it. Between their attack on the Garcia family, their association with Clementine, their targeting of Prescott, their murder of Francine, Jesus' interest in them, their assumed capture of Eleanor, their possession of medical supplies that could save Kate, and the revelation of David's position of power over them, we have a lot of reasons to be interested in the New Frontier. It's like they took the House Hardware plot from Season 2 and improved it tenfold. With Carver's group, we knew they were bad and we knew they were plot relevant, but most of what we knew about them prior to Episode 3 was from hearsay, not actual interactions with the group. And because of that, I was only vaguely interested in them because the story was telling me I should be, not because I or Clementine had any personal investment in them. Out of all the connections to the New Frontier that I mentioned before, Clementine's revelation as having been part of them is probably the most compelling of all. It adds a whole new layer of complexity to the game and the situation our main cast is in, and questioned my certainty about the group being flat-out antagonistic. If Clementine stayed with them to the extent of choosing to brand herself in their name, they must have redeeming qualities and moral complexity that we can't quite see yet. Later on, the revelation of David being the group's leader furthers this assertion, and leaves me wondering what exactly this group is all about. Another great part of the New Frontier is, of course, Clementine. Her characterization is pretty good. Somehow she's retained a lot of the qualities she had in Season 1 and 2, while seamlessly adding on new but realistic traits to her character, such as her enhanced self-sufficiency and teenagery bitterness. Even though I'm not the one controlling her, and therefore she's done some things I wouldn't have done, the age gap makes it so those actions don't necessarily feel out of character. Instead, it just feels like she's grown and experienced new things, which have caused her views and morals to shift away from where they were in Season 2. Even with all those changes, she's still clearly Clementine deep down, and I'm really impressed that Telltale was able to pull that off. One thing involving Clementine that I thought was brilliant, and that others found repulsive, was the accidental firing of her gun in the bar. That scene really shocked me. Up until that point, we were made to view Clementine as this efficient, strategic, and intelligent loner. And since we all love her as much as we do, we were all bound to trust her judgment and listen to whatever actions she suggested. That scene in the bar serves to remind us that Clementine is not infallible. She's not perfect. She is, at the end of the day, a child. She still has the capacity to make mistakes and do the wrong thing. I needed that reminder. If I hadn't gotten it, I would have probably sided with Clementine the whole game without thinking twice, and that would have been too easy. I'm also really glad this season isn't as straight up demoralizing as Season 2 was. At least, not yet. There hasn't really been any pointless cruelty or stupid shock value deaths. Instead, the deaths that have occurred have had weight and narrative purpose. Prescott also helped with lightening the game a bit. Even though the settlement inevitably fell, it was nice to be reminded that not everyone in this world is out to kill the innocent. It makes everything feel more realistic, and it distanced the season from the overtones of isolation that Season 2 carried. It also adds to the feeling of this world having distinct pockets of civilization with differing intentions and moral standards, and that helps the world feel more real. This season, overall, just feels like it has its act together, more so than either of the other two seasons did at this point in their respective narrative beats. It has a lot of potential, and I really hope it lives up to it.
Jane? If you're not feeling well, I can bring you something. Oh my god!
Once again, Telltale has deprived us of the ability to make real, far-reaching decisions in this game. A perfect example of this is the first flashback scene in Episode 1. Season 2 concludes with us making the difficult choice of deciding which of our two guardians will live and die. This choice was the climax of the entire season. It was major. And when I, personally, had to decide who would live and who would die, I was heartbroken over it. And yet, the character that does survive that confrontation dies anyway. And not even in some dignified, arc-fulfilling way. We're just tossed a 5-minute flashback and expected to accept it at that. And you know, everyone knew that was going to happen. Because honestly, none of the major choices you make in the Walking Dead game ever matter. All your choices lead to the exact same scenario. This has been an issue since Season 1. This is especially prominent when it comes to determinate character deaths. When a character has the chance to die and you decide to save them, they will inevitably die within the next 2 episodes anyway. This has always been true. If you save Carly, or Doug, or Ben, or Nick, or Alvin, or Sarah, or Kenny, or Jane, they all still die. So when you have the chance to save a character, it doesn't even feel like a relief. It feels like a death sentence. The same applies to things besides character deaths too. For example, strategic and moral choices. If you choose not to steal from the stranger, he still kidnaps Clementine and blames Lee. If you choose not to steal from Arvo, he still attacks you and your group. If you chop off Sarita's hand, she still dies. It's gotten to the point where I don't even really worry about making major choices anymore. For example, in the junkyard, I chose to stay at the house overnight. For a split second, I was really scared. I wondered if I did the right thing. But then I realized, who cares? If something bad happens, it's going to happen whether I chose to stay at the house or not. Because that's the way the game works. My choices don't matter. So, I stopped worrying. Same with leaving with Eleanor versus leaving with Tripp. I knew that it really didn't matter, because if one of those choices did lead to the deaths of one of my relatives, who cares? Because that same character is just going to be guaranteed to die later on anyway. And when Francine died, I didn't even bother wondering, oh god, did I cause this? What if I did something else? Would she still be alive? Because I knew for a fact that she wouldn't have been. I knew that any action I would have taken would have led to that result. This thought process came back again when having to decide between shooting Conrad or accepting his plan. I shot him, and I didn't even feel that guilty, because I'm sure he's just gonna die later on anyway for people who didn't choose to kill him in the train. So, who cares? I feel like the game shouldn't even offer you major choices anymore if this is what they're gonna amount to. Now, I'll admit I'm nitpicking a little bit here. It'd be dishonest of me to say that none of these choices mean anything at all. Even though a lot of paths lead to the same destination, they do ultimately impact the atmosphere of the game. They affect your relationship with other characters, and they solidify your own character's priorities and values. That's important in its own right. Additionally, a lot of the choice-dependent divergences in A New Frontier are actually pretty interesting. For example, the different scenes you're able to get in the beginning of episode 2 depending on the choices you made in episode 1. Another example would be the differences both in dialogue and setting you get depending on whether you're loyal to Clementine or not in the bar. I thought the differences presented in those instances were actually pretty well done. So I guess my main gripe is just with the way that Telltale has handled major choices in the past, and how it seems like they're gonna continue to handle them that way, given the way they ended the Kenny-Jane arc this season. It was all just so anticlimactic. And it feels misleading to be presented these scenarios that will seemingly impact the game in massive ways over and over, and then have them ultimately result in 1 or 2 minor scene changes, or sometimes nothing at all. It really sucks that these issues keep cropping up, because this season is up to a very strong start, and I don't want it to be bogged down by half-hearted illusions of choice.
What the hell's going on out here?
They said they weren't here to hurt anybody, so I was trying to see if they...
Oh my god.
Dad?
My hope for The Walking Dead Season 3 is that the writers don't lose sight of the story they've begun to build. That's what happened in Season 2. The first 2 episodes were great, but the rest of it was kind of strange and inconsistent. I could handle that last time, but this time I really want them to follow through with the characters, themes, and story they've already set up. It looks to me like they're gunning for a family versus friendship theme here. If not that, they're at least focusing heavily on the idea of family. That being said, having Kate or Gabe die in the next episode would probably ruin the season for me. Like, they'd have to do that really well in order for it to not feel stupid. Because then you've removed, like, the meat of the Garcia family, and that's what this game has been painted as being about. That's what the narrative has been focusing on. So it would feel kind of random and like a lost opportunity if they killed off the rest of your family in the middle of the season. It'd be a lot like what they did with Luke, building up tension by focusing on his relationship with Clementine and his differences with Kenny, seemingly leading to a choice between the two, then killing him off for like no reason whatsoever. So I guess my hope for A New Frontier is that the development staff just remains consistent here. If they can do that, I think this game will be really great. So those are my thoughts on Ties That Bind. I feel like this season has a lot of potential. I really like the new characters they've introduced and the themes they've begun to explore. I think if Telltale sticks to their guns here, this is going to be a really great game. That being said, I can't wait to see what episode 3 brings. Thank you all for watching, and remember to subscribe for more videos like this one.